Hello, friends. This is Reflections, a program sponsored by Paducah Cooperative Ministry, where together we do God's work with human hands. I'm Karen Winkel, co-host of the program. I pastor United Church of Paducah here in Paducah, and with me, co-host is Gregory Waldrop, who pastors Fountain Avenue United Methodist Church. Good to see you today, Gregory.
Glad to be right here with you and with you all as well. We've got a wonderful program set up today. We are, as always, exploring the various ministries throughout the community that are a part of our lives, sometimes in background kind of ways, hidden ways, sometimes more prominent. We have with us today Vonnie Hays-Adams, who is the director at the Merryman House.
That's correct.
The domestic abuse shelter and a sort of headquarters for our region. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Good. Tell us about your position there and how long you've been there, and introduce us to the Merryman House.
Sure. As you said, my name is Vonnie Hays-Adams, and in March I will have been with the agency for 3 years, and it really has gone very, very fast for me. We have a large home located here in Paducah, and we no longer say we're confidential because we do have obviously the FedEx and UPS and pizza delivered to our facility quite often, but we are in a residential area here in Paducah, and the home is a fairly older home. It's situated on 8 acres, so it's a very, very nice pastoral setting, very relaxing atmosphere, nice patio area. It's a 3-story home, so we're able to house about 30 individuals at a time in our facility, and right now we average around 27 to 28 people who are fleeing domestic violence every single day throughout the year. So that generally works out to be about half adults and half children. Most of the children are going to be under the age of 12. We very rarely have teenagers in shelter. We also have 3 outreach offices, which a lot of people are not aware of. We do have one here in Paducah that's located over in the Pierce Lackey, which is the Senior Housing Authority property here in Paducah. That just happens to be where we get free space, and so that's where we go. So that's how nonprofits work generally, is wherever you can get free stuff, that's where you end up. We've been in that facility since around 1998 is when they actually moved into the Housing Authority here in Paducah and started sharing property with them. We have a full-time staff person there who's there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, except for the exceptions of when she has to attend court in Ballard County and McCracken County. That office actually does serve Ballard and McCracken counties. We have another outreach office in Mayfield, and that office is very, very busy because it has to serve 4 counties. It serves Graves County, which the number by clients that we serve, it's our second largest county that we serve in our 8-county service area. And it serves Fulton, Hickman, Carlisle, and then Graves County. So she's in court quite a bit, but luckily for us, she's co-housed with some other wonderful programs in the Green Advocacy Center, which is there in Paducah. In Mayfield, I'm sorry, thank you. We have the CASA organization, PASAC, which is the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center, Merryman House, and then just the Victims Advocacy Group is also located there. So there's always someone there who can assist victims when they come to that office. There's someone generally in at least one of those offices that can greet you. Our other office is located in Murray, which houses, is also located at the Housing Authority. We do have to pay for space there, but we get a very, very decent rent. And we serve both Callaway and Marshall counties out of that office. And it's been over there since 1996. It's one of our older facilities. As far as being in the Housing Authority, it's fairly new, but we've had an office in Murray for quite some time. And actually, Callaway County, Graves County, McCracken County, that's kind of the hierarchy of individuals that we see throughout the year, victims. The most, obviously, in McCracken County, not that there's more domestic violence necessarily here, but the population's larger than Graves County, and then Callaway County. Marshall would be next, and then the 4 river counties. It just depends on the year as to where they fall and the number of victims we serve. But over the course of a year, in addition to the 300 individuals who will come into shelter, there's about 1,000 more who will visit those outreach offices who are either not ready to make the break to take them and their children out of the violence, or they're in some type of counseling program where the family's trying to work on that situation with some other methodology besides the one that we provide, or they've already left their perpetrators and are just struggling to deal with the emotional, the mental, and sometimes the financial situation that comes with that. And so we're there to help in all three of those areas as much as we can. We always help basic needs first. It's kind of a principle that we have. You know, you can't really work with someone until you get the roof over their head and food in their mouth and any medical attention that they need before you start trying to work with them on all the other things. And so the majority of our time, if you just want to talk about broad stroke programs that the Merryman House provides, we spend a lot of time dealing with those basic needs issues before we can ever address anything else.
Great.
I'm kind of wondering if you could, you know, generalize, tell us the journey that someone makes to come to Merryman House.
Sure.
What, you know, is it?
And I appreciate the fact that you call it a journey, because so many people don't understand domestic violence and how very, very difficult it is for a woman to escape. And I like to use the word escape rather than leave. It's very, very similar to being a prisoner of war, in that it has to be very thought out, has to be very strategic, because when she does leave, the violence can escalate 10 times from what it has been when she's lived with a perpetrator on a regular basis. So for her, it's a mentality of, I've got to figure out how to escape, which means you have to plan for a lot of things. You need to know you have a place to go, you're going to need food, you're going to need water, you're going to need money, you're going to need gas in your car, those types of things, as opposed to, well, I'm just going to leave, because that sort of says, well, I just got up one day and I just decided to walk out.
Yeah.
And that's not generally how we work with victims, in that we tell them you need to create for yourself a safety plan. That if this is not the time for you, if you're not ready to take the steps that you need to do to get a healthy relationship and get a healthy opinion of yourself, then you need to have some kind of strategy in place, be it with a neighbor, a family member, someone who that you can depend on, where you can keep an extra set of clothes, a little extra money, maybe your prescription drugs, some important paperwork like your Social Security cards, those types of things, so that in the event you do have to up and leave in the middle of the night, those things are already taken care of you. That's the first thing that we try to counsel individuals on, is if it's okay if you don't want to leave. You love this person, you want to try to make your marriage work, that's fantastic. We'll support you in doing that, but understand you don't have to die in this situation, and so you need to have a plan for where you're going to go when the violence escalates to that point, especially if a lot of women, the breaking point's when the violence is projected onto the children. That's generally when we see, okay, I've got to do something because he's going to hurt our children. It takes about 7 to 8 times before an individual actually leaves, and leaves for good. And I don't really have a great explanation or what's the magic about 7. Generally, when we've seen a woman come into shelter 5, 6 times, at that point we have to start having the conversation. If you keep going back, you know already this is not going to get better, because we can document how the violence has escalated over the years. So if you keep going back, the only things we can possibly see happening here, if you don't get some help, are that he eventually may kill you, because he has to, I guess in a sense, escalate the violence to maintain the control, because every time she comes to us, she gets a little more educated about how domestic violence happens, why it happens, and all those types of things. And so she's a little bit better adept at handling and knowing when the violence is going to occur and those types of things. And so he has to be a little more creative, a little more controlling with the violence. And so there's no doubt in our mind that if you get to number 10, 11, or 12, at that point you are really playing with a ticking time bomb, and really at risk if you just keep going back into the environment with no intervention whatsoever from the medical profession, mental health professionals, anybody. It's a very risky time for both you and him, because generally what's very, very common in domestic violence homicide is suicide. Is ultimately he may kill you and then turn right around and kill himself, which it's a very, very common phenomenon. It's probably what he's been threatening all along. And when you get to that point in the relationship, that's the final straw, that he can pull out and say is that, well, I'll just kill myself if you leave, because I can't live without you, and means it. And we've seen that happen too, is where she finally does leave, and then the remorse of, oh my goodness, this individual has taken their life because of me, and all that guilt and those types of things. It's really a lifelong process to sort of deprogram somebody who's lived in this at most of the times their whole adult life. but more importantly, so many of these individuals lived in it as a child as well. They grew up in it. That's what we see over and over and over again with individuals who come into shelter, is they were children of individuals who were victims of domestic violence, and they may or may not have been abused themselves. About 75% of them were. Most men who abuse their spouse also abuse their children, and it's very, very difficult when we get those little kids into shelter and mom wants to go back because that's how they have a roof over their head and health insurance and those kinds of things, and the children of course are begging and pleading, please don't take me back there. It's very, very hard for us as professionals to step back and allow her as the adult in the family to make the decision about what's right for her and what she thinks is right for her kids.
You've used the she and he's in
Sure.
fairly standard ways.
Yeah.
I'm confident that
It's
the
not just primarily in that direction. It is for us in this area. About 95% of the clients that we serve are female. Although we have seen a growth in the number of men that we serve, and I don't know if it's more men are starting to come forward, if we're doing a better job of reaching out to the men and saying it's okay, you can come to us, and being more open to that. We've had 3 men in shelter this past year, which is the first time we've had that many, and that doesn't seem like many. It is for us to have had individuals who actually come and stay with us for an extended period of time. I don't know in the future what we're seeing when we do surveys with the younger groups, like in middle school, high school. We're seeing a lot more of female violence against male partners in that age group. And I don't know if we just didn't look at it before at that age and know it was already there, if no one paid much attention to that. But the teen dating violence is really more on an equal scale than when you get into adulthood. You're going to not see as many. It's going to be really skewed. It's going to be the 95 and 5. When you get down into the lower grades, it's much more 50-50. Young boys will say, she's hit me, she's done things to me, she's stalked me, she's those types of things, when you don't hear that as much when you get in 18 and above. So we don't really know. It's the first time our agency's really paid a lot of attention to that and been pretty active. We've been out in the schools with the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center trying to talk with kids about healthy relationships and what is a proper and appropriate, exchange. It's okay to be mad at each other. It's okay to get angry. Those are normal feelings, but how you handle those are not to be in a physical or degrading or, way to put each other down and that type of thing. And that's been a real challenge for us. What's amazing is one of our first pilot schools was Ballard County Schools. And we looked at both the A school kids, which everybody typically thinks are going to be your more problem families, more problem children, and then we did an honors class. The surveys were almost identical that came back to us, and the types of violence that was going on in relationships and the types of things that were happening, which was pretty, I guess I had been sucked into that whole prejudice of thinking that, okay, the A school kids, their surveys are going to be so much more over the top as far as violence is concerned and those types of things, and it just wasn't the case. It was very interesting to look at the things in the comments the kids had to say. And that was about, I think those were 8th, 9th, and 10th graders that we were talking to. So it was kind of revealing. It kind of blew some of my myths out of the water, that although I know because of what I do in adulthood, it happens to all socioeconomic backgrounds and classes of individuals and that type of thing. I guess I thought in children, it would be more the troubled kids, and it wasn't. It certainly wasn't. The same statistics hold true even at those young ages. Yeah.
Now, you asked a good question about gender. Is what you're focusing on primary relationships with a partner, or what about, because I know there are issues of elder abuse or a parent
I wish
and an
my
adult
funding
child?
would let me do all of it, because it's all domestic abuse. However, our shelter is certified to be what's called intimate partner abuse, in that there has to be some sort of emotional, mental, and in some cases physical connection with that individual in order for you to qualify for our services. Intimate is defined by a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, and we don't try to make you do that when you call if you indicate, this is somebody that you have a relationship with, it's not just a one time, you were raped by a total stranger or something like that, and you still, even if that happened, I'm still going to take you in. It's still a very violent, intimate act, even though it was for somebody you didn't know. We would still protect you in that environment. if you had nowhere else to go. Some people choose to do other things when they've been in that situation, but primarily our funding is for intimate partner abuse. What we do when we get a telephone call, say from someone who's been in an elder abuse situation, either from a caretaker or another family member, that's generally the most common thing we hear, is that the children of an elderly person or a friend or somebody who's associated with them in some way, not a paid person, not somebody who's been paid to come in and take care of them, is generally the one who's the perpetrator in that situation. We have always worked with the local authorities and housed that individual. What we call it is a temporary entry. Yeah. And we let you come on in until we can work with the proper individuals and help find a location. And those are probably some of the most heartbreaking things, especially when it's an older adult who it's their children. I guess I have a really, really hard time with that. It goes against my own personal beliefs, and I think most of the beliefs of everybody in this country. Everybody has a hard time with that kind of situation. So it's very, very difficult. And some of the abuse is just really the neglect is the big thing there. Be left alone for extended periods of time. Individuals who are not capable of taking care of themselves, and so they just end up in some very, 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 very sad situations.
The shelter in Paducah, is it the primary shelter for the 8 counties, or do you have scattered housing?
We have additional individuals who work with us on a one-on-one private type basis. There are several churches in our area who offer what they call safe houses. There's one in Marshall County, that's actually the name of it, is Safe House. And they will allow us to place domestic violence victims. They can house about 3 families. It's just a home there in Marshall County. The problem with that is there's no security measures. So if it's a victim from Marshall County, that's still very, very risky to put a family in there because there's no staff on site. Of course, obviously, when they put someone in there, they let the authorities know, law enforcement know, but they can't just hang out over there at that one facility. Right. So it is very risky. We have the same thing in Mayfield. We have an organization called Lifehouse, and they actually serve the homeless primarily, but they will allow up to 3, 4, sometimes 5 individuals who are in a domestic violence situation live in that facility. In Murray, there's a homeless shelter that's actually run by the Housing Authority called the Gentry House, and we've utilized that facility as well. But once again, we're the only certified domestic violence shelter, and so because of that designation, that's where the funding goes, is to our organization. It's not to say I wouldn't love to have certified satellite facilities in some of the other counties. I certainly could use them. It's very, very difficult for a victim in Callaway County, for instance, to just come to Paducah. You're going to have to take your children out of school. It's really hard to keep domestic violence quiet when you're going to go to Paducah to an emergency shelter. Everybody's going to know ultimately. And if part of your goal is not for that to happen, that you just would want to keep your own confidentiality and the confidentiality for your children, that's virtually impossible to do and come to Paducah. It's even more unrealistic for an individual who lives in, say, the city of Hickman, because Paducah is, an hour and a half away, and sometimes seems like the other side of the planet to an individual who's lived in that area the entire life. It's actually closer for them in some cases for us to send them to shelters in Tennessee. And we do have cooperative agreements with Tennessee, Missouri, and Illinois because of that very situation, because we sometimes are full. And so we draw very heavily on our border states who have, there's a facility in Cairo, there's one in Metropolis, there's one in Paris, Tennessee, and one in Jackson that we utilize from time to time. So it really helps out a lot to have those relationships, because otherwise we have Hopkinsville, and then our next closest shelters in Kentucky are Owensboro and Bowling Green, which Bowling Green is probably the easiest because we have a bus route there. But getting a victim from our shelter to any other of those other places can sometimes be pretty difficult too, because there's no public transportation system. They'll take them there, and a private cab is incredibly expensive, and we would never risk a volunteer doing that just for the sake of what we do. You just can't, oh yeah, let's come on out, I want to volunteer and take people in my own car. We would just never do that. It's just too risky. We don't do that ourselves, and we certainly wouldn't ask a member of the community to do that for us.
So you're talking about you've got a
Oh,
staff.
yeah. We have a great staff. It's larger now than it has been in quite some time. I guess we've stretched as far as we can stretch. We have 21 individuals who work in our facility. 17 of those actually work in shelter, and the rest work through the outreach process. I guess the outreach workers are probably, they do it all because they're there by themselves pretty much all of the time, although they're located in facilities where there's other individuals, but they have to be able to do everything that we do by themselves except the actual housing of individuals. Now the house, we got to have paid staff on staff 24 hours a day, every day of the week of the year, because that's part of the certification process. Is you can't have a volunteer, for instance, there on your midnight, because most domestic violence calls don't come to us at 10 in the morning.
Right.
It's generally
office
after 10 in
hours.
the evening. Yeah. So you've really got to have a paid staff person there available at all hours of the day or night. Weekends are a real popular time too, and of course you're not going to have a lot of staff there on the weekend too. You're going to have drugs and alcohol influence a whole lot on the weekend and those types of activities. We like to say it doesn't cause it. Alcohol and drugs don't cause it, but they certainly escalate it and create a more volatile situation for law enforcement when they show up to help out in this situation.
I know you've made some plans, approached the city about new sites and expanding the possibilities. I've sort of heard of some of the things on the 8 acres that might be developing.
Right, we're really excited about everything that's happened with the city. I think it's brought a lot of people to the table to think about this issue. It's actually, sometimes even controversial. Publicity is a good thing for an agency because it gets more people interested in what you're doing and what's happening to individuals in Paducah. The number one reason women go back is the roof over their head. That's a pretty common known fact in domestic violence families is that when she doesn't think she can provide for herself and her children with an actual structure or housing, that's the first reason she's going to go back. So what we try to offer at the Merryman House, and we do this in conjunction with PCM and Heartland Cares and a lot of other agencies, if we have always worked together and applied to the big pots of money in Frankfurt to get housing programs for at-risk individuals in Paducah and McCracken County. And our funding that we get is to help individuals do what we call transition from our emergency shelter to some sort of transitional housing before they move on to taking on the responsibility of the permanency of I'm going to have to be responsible forever for myself and my children potentially if I don't at some point find another partner or whatever I choose to do. So that transition phase is very, very critical. It's the sort of the make it or break it point. And we want to have as many supports in place as we can to help them be successful. If you can take away that burden or at least lighten it, you've gained so much in helping her to stay safe and stay out of a relationship where she's going to be hurt or her children are. And so we've really promoted the transitional type housing programs, and that's what we are doing with the buildings. We're going to actually build some duplexes close to our shelter on our 8 acres. Where individuals, of course, you'll still have the proximity to us. You'll have a brand new apartment to live in, and it is subsidized to a certain extent for a certain period of time. At some point, you always expect individuals to make it on their own. I mean, that's our goal too, is because I don't like DV to be a lifetime, commitment to case management. We do believe at some point individuals should be able to move on and live free of us as well. We say we want you to live free of domestic violence, but we'd like you to live free of us at some point too. We're always there. But we think having this facility, is adjacent to ours and all of us being close by, it'll help just in that security blanket of, gosh, I'm really feeling like I want to go back. This is really hard. I don't think I can do it. And then, having us to come and talk to and some additional case management and other financial supports, that we provide, just real basic things like being sure you're connected with appropriate school personnel when your children need additional things that maybe you can't quite afford. At this point in time, the school systems in our area are fantastic at being able to produce tennis shoes and backpacks and those types of things when they're very, very needed for our individuals.
I want to ask, there may be viewers who are feeling moved and touched by what you're saying. How would someone in the community be able to be a support and
Sure.
to participate in this important work you're doing?
The thing I like to stress is that most of our individuals, when they come to us, they haven't done the safety planning I talked about earlier, where you've got your extra change of clothes and your extra supplies and your bag pack. So what I like to stress is that what would you take if you were just going to go on an overnight trip with your friends or a family member? Well, you know, you would pack an extra set of clothes, and you'd pack your toiletry items, and you know, you might throw in a few fun things to do. Anything that you would put in a suitcase. So just take an overnight trip. You know, don't even think about the fact that they live with us generally for 45 days. Anything you'd put in that bag to take just for one night, that's the stuff I need. It's the basics. It's socks, it's underwear, it's, you know, sleeping clothes, pajamas, you know, those types of things.
Toiletries,
Toiletry items, toothbrush, hairbrush, combs, all of those types of things are the things that we go through. And then keep in mind, they're there for 45 days. So while we love to get those little travel size that everybody picks up when they're in their hotel, those are great, but they only last you for a couple of days. And most of our residents are going to be there an average of 45 days. So we do like to get, you know, the full size product, because she'll and her family will definitely use it before they leave our facility. And in addition to that, when she does leave, we like to send her with a whole nother set of things, so that she starts at least the first 30 days with the basic items: dishwashing liquid, dish detergent, laundry detergent, toilet paper, all of those things that, you know, you go and just pile your cart full, you know, just throw an extra one in. You know, you're talking $1 type item, just, you know, throw another one in your cart and bring it to us.
So what would be the telephone number for a viewer to call?
The local
to get
number is 443-6001, and when you call that number, it's always best to call us before you bring a donation, to let us know you're coming. If we're very busy or if they're very short staffed, we're probably not going to open the gate, because it's just too much of a security risk to do that. So if you call ahead of time, we know you're coming. It kind of avoids some hassle in that security process as you come onto our property. Once you get into the property, obviously you don't come in. I think a lot of people assume, you know, we're going to just come on and give a tour. We can't do that because of confidentiality reasons. So I hope no one's ever offended when we greet you at your car and say, we'll be glad to take that in for you. And a lot of people, I think, just want to help bring it in, and we're just like, you know, we really appreciate that, but we can't, because unfortunately there are those individuals out there who would be taking advantage of the situation and just trying to find out to who's in the facility. But if you're calling from outside of Paducah, McCracken County area, it's 1-800-585-2686, and that's actually also our hotline number. So either one can be used for both. You can call
and say that number again.
It's 1-800-585-2686. And it's 24 hours a day.
Vonnie, we could talk another 30 minutes.
Another
and
we need more
exactly,
time,
but you've been a marvelous guest, important work in the community. And we thank you for joining us,
you all
and we
so
thank
much for the opportunity.
our viewers today. Go to paducah2.org to catch this program online and any other programs that are archived there. Thank you for joining us today. Reflections, Paducah Cooperative Ministry, doing God's work with human hands. Join us in that work if you can, however you can. Thank you for joining us. Shalom.
Shalom.